Welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about the relationship between um, consciousness and meaning. And I'm going to explore the themes of consciousness and meaning through the analogy of the game of chess. So here's my basic understanding of it. Consciousness encounters infinite information, or potentially infinite information, which is much like in a chess game. So in a chess game, when you're playing your moves, when the position is unfolding and the game is unfolding, what you encounter is a field of information that is combinatorially explosive. I think that's a term from mathematics, and it means basically that the complexity of the system far exceeds the capacity of your mind to understand or to compute or something like that. Um, and so you could imagine that in a chess game, you have all of these pieces which you need to pay attention to. The pieces attack and they defend and they have certain threats and certain potentials. But all the pieces are interrelated in very complex ways. And in chess, this is called it's called like calculation, when you can kind of envision a certain sequence of patterns. If I do this, the other player does that. If the other player does that, I do this. And you can kind of calculate these. They're called lines. You calculate these lines of potential in your mind. But the problem is that there is an infinity of lines, and you couldn't possibly, because of the time constraints on the game, and because of the cognitive constraints in the game, the constraints of your ability to actually compute that amount of information, you couldn't possibly go through all of the potential lines in every position. And even when another move is played, the complexity grows. Okay, and it's so chess is combinatorially explosive in that sense. It's at some point it gets so complex that you couldn't possibly attend to all of the variables. And so this is like consciousness too. And when I say consciousness, I mean mind. I mean the awareness that is watching this video. I mean intelligence. I mean something like that. I mean the unique nature of our being in the world. And so because it's the same, right? So if you go, so like even phenomenologically, even in terms of the nature of our experience, someone just left me a comment which said, there's basically infinite videos on YouTube, but I'm watching this one. And so if you're watching this one, it's even this frame is at work here, right? You're paying attention to this. This is meaningful. Everything else kind of falls into the background in this moment as you pay attention to this. So it's kind of the same in chess, is that there's an infinite possibility of moves to play and lines to pursue. And yet from that infinite possibility, something needs to be selected, something needs to be chosen, and action needs to be taken. So the process by which we select information to attend to is what I want to bring attention to in this video. There's a professor at the University of Toronto called John Vervaeke who uses the term relevance realisation to characterize this process of attending to something, to framing something, to drawing attention to something, and ignoring basically everything else. Everything else becomes less salient, and something, a particular pathway, a particular phenomenon, becomes meaningful. So the term John Vervaeke uses, as I understand it, is relevance realization for that. I've been listening to someone else called Jonathan Pageau, who talks about the frame of our phenomenological experience, which is basically talking about the same idea. Jordan Peterson, in his discussions with Sam Harris, uses the term a priori structure, which is drawing on the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, who argued for a priori structure, a structure before experience, before the data of experience comes in. There's a frame, there's something which molds and shapes how that experience lays itself out, how the structure of our experience, let's say. All of this is similar to Carl Jung's idea of archetype being a psychological potential, which Jung thinks of in an evolutionary way. The idea would be that we've got a kind of evolved psychological instinct to encounter the world in a certain way according to a certain pattern, and that the data of the world is thus always going to be structured and shaped in a certain way. Now, I'm sure there's nuances and differences between these different ideas and the different perspectives of Jonathan Pageau, John Vervaeke, Jordan Peterson, and Carl Jung. But I wanted to give you all these different examples because I think that, roughly speaking, they're speaking about the same idea, which through the lens of chess, we can understand quite simply. A player is playing a game of chess. There's 64 squares. There's however many pieces. That's the data. That's the information. And then there's and then that's kind of the mere facts, is the position, how the pieces are laid out. And then on top of those facts are interrelationships, lines of potential of attacks, threats, defenses, etc. And the complexity of that information on the board, it quickly becomes combinatorially explosive. It becomes way too complex to possibly attend to. And so meaning is a question of how our cognitive resources or how our attention is distributed. Because the thing is, to play a game of chess, you need to choose a move. Like, you need to move to win. And you need to win to be playing the game. So maybe I'll get into that in a minute, because I think there's some interesting things to think about there. But insofar as you're engaged in the frame of chess, you accept the axioms of chess, which means implicitly when you play a game, you accept the rules, you accept the axioms of chess. In that frame, your aim is to win. And if your aim is to win, then there's certain choices which are good moves, and there are certain choices which are bad moves. And so now we get an idea of kind of how the structure is coming into play, because maybe an expert or a grandmaster would see the board in a different way to a novice or a new player and an experienced player. Both of them would see the board in a different way, even though the facts of the board would be the same. So let's imagine a chessboard with a particular position on it. And that position are the facts, okay? So the facts are the pieces, where they are on the squares. Okay, it's a very particular set of facts. But then basically the novice and the expert see the board differently, which is to say that they attend to the board differently, which is to say that meaning shines forth to them differently in different ways. And it's not that the board itself, the matter, the material substrate, the material elements of the board, the actual where the pieces are on the board, etc., it's not that that actually is informing them about what to attend to, what to value in that context. No, instead, what is doing that is something like their values, their experiences, the lenses that they've built in their eye. Because, and I'd say the eye of the mind. Think of the eye of the mind in this metaphor, but because the eyes themselves, the way perception actually happens in the physical bodily eye, is that there's many like layers of lens. So there's many like layers of frame, and those layers of frame help us attend and help us ignore the irrelevant and attend to the relevant. So relevance realization is built into perception too. The very act of perception is a form of relevance realization, to use John Vervaeke's term, because a lot of data, in my experience, is now being ignored as I focus on this video. For example, this video has become salient to me, meaningful to me, relevant to me, and thus I attend to it. So it's the same in the game of chess, okay? But so hopefully I've laid out that concept okay. What is meaning? Meaning is the a priori structure, or the values, or the lens through which a lot of potential information is ignored and is categorized as irrelevant, and it does not factor in, and then a very particular aspect of the information potential is given attention. Now, why is that aspect given attention? Now, why is it given attention? Well, we could think that, like, what's the difference between a good and a bad chess player? Is that one, like, let's take the expert, let's take the grandmaster. They see the board differently to the inexperienced player. And the reason they see it is because they've got many lenses and layers or frames built up over time, which has educated their perception. So they understand the implications of a particular threat to their position. They understand, they may be able to calculate in certain ways to understand different potentials which could unfold in the play. And what this implies is that they've basically cultivated their attention. They've like tuned their meaning apparatus to attend in a very particular way and to see the board in a very particular way. Instantly, this is kind of what this I feel like this meaning, or this relevance realization, this process of meaning making, actually spans across many different domains. For example, think about a chef. A chef, basically the role of a chef is to have taste. Or think of an art critic, like an art critic, or even a designer, or an artisan. What these people have, what the value they bring to a market is their taste, and taste is an aesthetic judgment. And so, what is taste? Like, what is taste in the context of food or in the context of art? Well, taste is basically this relevance realization, or this meaning making I'm talking about. It's the ability to recognize what should be paid attention to. So, for example, in food, maybe it's too salty, maybe it's too sweet, maybe it's a perfect balance, perfect harmony of different flavors, or whatsoever. But what it is that, again, even eating food is combinatorially explosive, in the sense that there's many aspects to a meal: the visual element, the way it smells, the way it's presented, the nuances of the different taste, the nuances of how the food interacts with our palate. All of these potential bits of data could be attended to, in principle. You could look at a particular element of of how something tastes, or there's many different elements to a meal which we could be drawing attention to. But really, what a chef is paid for, what the value of a chef is that they have taste, and what that means is that they learn to ignore certain elements that they could be paying attention to, and instead pay attention to what is relevant. They don't pay attention to what is irrelevant. And so it's kind of the same with an expert chess player, is they learn to ignore what is irrelevant and pay attention to what is relevant. So let me put it this way. It's almost as though good chess play, or taste in art, in aesthetics, is, okay, it's when our relevance realization is tuned to what is relevant. Okay, let me put it that way. Whereas bad taste or poor play in chess is when our relevance realization, which is a mechanism or a frame which consciousness has, which mind has, which we must bring to bear on the combinatorially explosive information potential. We must have a frame, so we must have a form of relevance realization. But perhaps there's different qualities of it, and there's good chess play and there's bad chess play, or there's good taste and bad taste in art, for example. And so what's the difference? Well, I would put to you that the difference is that good play in chess is when relevance realization is tuned to what is relevant, and bad taste is when relevance realization is tuned to what is irrelevant. Now, I need to unpack now how I'm using this term, relevant, irrelevant. What do I quite mean by that? Well, I think of it this way. It's as though you've got, imagine this is our individual mind, like the mind of you if you played a game of chess, okay? You go play a game of chess, an individual mind kind of encountering the chess game. This is you. And you've got this relevance realization frame where you ignore certain things and you attend to certain things and you focus on certain things. So that's how the perception is organized, according to frames and lenses like the eye. So you bring this very particular frame to bear on the chess game. Well, what does good play and bad play mean? Well, the way I think of it is that you've got something above, something objective, we could say, which judges that frame. And so that frame is now in relationship to a higher ideal, let's say. And that higher ideal is let's say perfect play, or beauty. In the art, in art and aesthetics, it would be beauty, or in it would be the perfect meal, or it would be beauty, or it would be perfect play. Okay. And so now that sounds very platonic. Well, it kind of is. I'm talking about a kind of form, or an ideal, or a principle, which is the highest thing, the highest that chess play could attain to. I will stick with chess to keep the analogy, and to hopefully unpack the idea a bit more. So what that means is that it's like we've got a very specific position we're playing. Here's your mind encountering the chess game, the individual mind. Each new chess game, there are more possible chess games than there are atoms in the known universe. So that's a crazy fact, but it is what it is. That's just the mathematics of chess, is that there's that many potential positions in chess. So your mind here encounters a very unique and definite position each time. And then the problem is, how do we attend to that position? Okay, what do we ignore? What's relevant? Now, a bad player is going to find relevant things that are irrelevant. So, for example, the focus will be drawn to make a move where they might leave a piece undefended and lose that piece, or they might give the other player an advantage in some way by making that move. So they're making relevant something that is actually irrelevant. Now, actually irrelevant from what perspective? Well, from a higher perspective than this. Okay, that's the best way I can explain it. Like ontologically, like in terms of how being is structured, there is a higher order principle which is being violated when they play a bad move. Within the frame of chess, I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible. Within the frame and the axioms of the chess game, which are you're playing chess, you could be playing anything else, but you're not, you're playing chess. To play chess, you need to accept certain axioms. You have to accept that a pawn moves in a certain way, that a bishop moves in a certain way, that a knight and a rook and a queen and a king, they all move in certain ways, that there are different rules which structure it, that one player plays and then the next player plays and then it comes back. That there's time limits, there's all these constraints on the game, okay? And you accept those axioms, those assumptions, by playing the game, because you could be playing Monopoly, okay? You could be playing football. You could be playing another game, but you're not. You're playing chess, okay? If you are playing chess, implicitly, you don't need to explicitly say, oh, I accept, but implicitly in your actions, in the way, in the very fact of your playing, you're accepting certain predicates, certain assumptions, the rules of chess, okay? And then with the rules of chess, the aim or the telos of chess, the goal of chess, which is I'm playing, I want to win this game, okay? That is the goal, is to win. And to win, you need to make certain moves, and you need to win, basically, your relevance realization, your meaning making, your frame needs to be tuned in a certain way. And it needs to be tuned, I would say tuned or aligned. It needs to be tuned or aligned to a higher order principle. That higher order principle is something like truth, or as I said in the art world, beauty. I'll use Plato's the good, the true, and the beautiful, okay? And the transcendentals. So in art, that higher good would be beauty. That's what good taste is, like an artist having good taste. In chess, it would be the truth of the right move and the wrong move. Okay, what the best move is in a particular position. Now, I will emphasize the position is unique or idiosyncratic. There are all these different, there's as many possible chess positions as there are atoms in the known universe. So it's a very unique position that mind consciousness like encounters each time, in the same way that each new artwork is unique, or each new meal is unique and idiosyncratic. But then how can we talk about truth, like correct play in chess, or how can we talk about beauty? Because isn't it all just relative? Like, aren't there just different positions and there's no like one way to play the games? Well, no, it's not just relative, you see, because there is a best move in every particular situation. That's the point. And the point is that a good player, an expert, let's just say a good player has their relevance realization tuned to a higher order principle. Okay. So in Eastern Orthodox theology, in Christian theology and Eastern Orthodox theology, as I understand it, there is this notion of the heart, or the nous. No, the nous, I think it's pronounced in Greek. The nous is like this principle within us, like the spiritual eye or something like that, which can it's like our potential for spiritual intuition, like our connection to God, our ability to see, our ability to know God or something like that. And it's the nous. And the way the Orthodox think about sin, as I understand it, I'm still learning, but is that the nous becomes diseased or corrupted, and that actually it comes contorted and diseased and corrupted in different ways, and that there's basically layers of deception and confusion and stuff like that over the nous, which is like our intrinsic capacity for spiritual intuition. When I say spiritual intuition, when I mean the knowledge of God, you could think of it like in terms of Plato's transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful. Okay, the good, the true, and the beautiful. Okay, the good, a moral, ethical life, the true, a mind attuned to what's true, an intellectual life, and then the beautiful and aesthetic life. Good taste, like with art, etc. So, and then what those three transcendentals have their substance in would be something like God. So, and then nous would be how we kind of our ability to perceive those things or see those things clearly, for our perception to facilitate the apprehension of those things. So the Orthodox think of sin, which the Greek word for sin is hamartia, which means missing the mark. Okay, so think of it like the nous is the arrow which hits the mark of truth, beauty, good. The nous is our ability to aim correct. And then hamartia or sin is our wayward aims, okay, where we aim somewhere that's irrelevant, that's wrong or something like that. And now it comes back to what I was saying about the difference between a good player and a good chess player and a bad chess player. Okay, what was I saying? I was saying the good player's relevance realization is attuned to what is relevant. So that's like the nous, purified, clear, cleansed, able to hit the mark true, to aim true, to hit the mark. The relevance realization, the meaning making is attending to what's relevant, okay, to what's real. We could say real is a difficult word, but maybe it's an appropriate word here. What is real is the true, the good, the beautiful, the transcendental, etc. And then hamartia, sin, is like the missing of that mark, and there's many different ways to miss that mark. And now what that is the relevance realization basically distorted or corrupted in certain ways. And this is kind of the nature of deception. So it's like the nous, it becomes diseased. Our spiritual perception becomes diseased and corrupted in different ways. So relevance realization is now paying attention to, giving meaning to things that are irrelevant in a transcendental sense, from a higher perspective. They're irrelevant. From the eye of beauty, we could say, if we could imagine if we imagine the form of the beautiful or the true or the good as an energy, or as like an intelligence, as a consciousness, as a potential of consciousness that looks down upon us, and kind of judges our moves in the chess game. So we're a consciousness making a move in the chess game, but then the truth of like the ultimate chess game, or the ultimate perfect game, kind of looks down on us and then judges each move in that sense. So that's a bit of a way of thinking about sin as relevance, as paying attention to the irrelevant, and thinking about virtue as paying attention to the relevant. So using words like sin and virtue, we get now into morality. perhaps I won't go too deep into morality here, but what I want to say is that these three domains, keep these three domains from Plato in mind: the good, the true, the beautiful. The good is the moral life, what is right morally, what actions are right morally, and what are wrong, good and evil, or something like that. The good, the true, what is false and what is true, and what is beautiful and what is not. And so these are difficult, ideas to defend, and they're quite abstract ideas. And so it's easy enough to say, look, there's no such thing as beauty or truth or goodness, which is kind of the postmodern critique in many ways, to say like, how can you defend such transcendental concepts? And the thing about that is, if we come back to the chess game, each new chess position is unique. Each position is unique. Okay, that crazy fact about how many numbers of potential chess positions there are. Okay, so each one's unique. So it could be tempting to say, because this is unique, because this position has never been seen before, how I act in this position is relative. Like, it's relative to the position, and it's a unique position. It's never been seen before. So how could we say that there's a right way to behave in this situation? There's not. There are just different positions, different situations, which is kind of like the postmodern critique about there's many different ways to interpret. There's many different forms of interpretation. And so how am I to say that what I'm saying is true? Let's just get rid of that idea of truth. But what I'm arguing for here is for an ontological hierarchy, a sense in which that the games we play are locally particular and definite and unique and idiosyncratic, and kind of never been seen before in that sense. And yet there is a way in which we can judge our relevance realization, the pattern and the way in which we pay attention in those games, which is our meaning making. There's a way in which we can hold that to a higher standard, which is the standard of, in chess, good play and bad play. And good play and bad play is within the frame of chess. And let me try and relate this more to life, make it more kind of relevant existentially, is that the way I think about it is that if you're playing a game of chess, you accept the axioms of the chess game. Well, existential philosophy helps us kind of make this more down to earth to our lives, is that by living life, you are playing the chess game in the same way. Like you're alive, and in that is a frame, that is an existential frame, in the same way that playing a chess game is a frame. In the same way that you could be playing Monopoly instead of chess, but you're playing chess. You could be dead instead of alive, but you're alive. That's kind of how I think of it. So like implicit to existence, to existence, it like are certain axioms, are certain aims, are certain rules, there's a certain frame. And like I don't want to like oversimplify it and say life's just a game kind of thing, but like within those existential conditions, there are ways to sin, like to miss the mark of the good, the true, and the beautiful, or flourishing, or success, or whatever words we might use for such things. But there are marks like the good, the true, and the beautiful, which is like living a good life, and then there are marks which like miss that mark. And so that's where you can kind of think about things like heaven and hell, like by pursuing the path of Hamartia, by going down the road of Hamartia, of sin, it leads to kind of hell worlds, like, and to point to that, I would say, like the 20th century, the kind of end of statement, you know, you've got Hitler, you've got Stalin, you've got the Nazis, you've got the communists. Just go, like, look at what they did, like, look at how the world was configured in such a consciousness, in such a mind. So what it is that Hitler and Stalin have their relevance realization, have their meaning making, have their way of ignoring potential information and paying attention to certain values, to certain things. It's just that meaning making is diseased, kind of like the Nous being diseased by sin in Orthodox theology. Which is actually what Solzhenitsyn said in his Templeton address, I think, in the 80s, about what happened in Russia in the communist era. Was that he said, basically, when I was young, before all this happened, the elders used to say that men have forgotten God. This is why all these bad things have happened. And now here I am addressing you 50 years later, having lived through the Gulag, having spoken to many people, having written the Gulag Archipelago, like gone through all of this. And still, I couldn't put it to you more simply than the reason all of this has happened is because men have forgotten God. Which is interesting, because I think it relates to this idea I'm expressing, is that, and Solzhenitsyn speaking with this, I would say, more from an Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox frame there. And so I'm kind of intuiting and making connections here, but the notion would be that the nous, the spiritual, the capacity for spiritual intuition and knowledge of God. When I say God, you could just think of it as the good, the true, and the beautiful, like the source of those ideals. Is that, yeah, so like that capacity has become blinded, become corrupted, become pathologized in many ways, and that's what leads to hell, basically. And the closest things we have to hell, I would say, are, some of the things that happened in the 20th century under communism, under Nazism. And so John Vervaeke, who coined this term relevance realization, talks about bullshit, about the ways in which we can become deceived. And Jordan Peterson talks a lot about the lie as the root of pathology in Freudian psychology, or in Solzhenitsyn's analysis of Soviet Russia, the lie infecting the heart, kind of thing. Like, this is how I understand it. And so how does this all relate to chess? Well, it's kind of like, if our relevance realization, do I want to say machinery? I don't know, like if our frame, let's say, because we have to have a frame, we have to have a way of distributing cognitive resources, we have to have a way of attending, a way of finding things meaningful. Then the question is what, and what is right to find meaningful, so to speak. So there's this kind of horizontal move of attending in certain ways, valuing certain things, but then there's like a vertical move of like the good, the true, and the beautiful, like the ideals, the transcendentals. So I think I might have said everything I want to on this topic. I think there's a lot more to cover, of course, but this is just it's an idea I've been thinking about for a while, and I wanted to share some thoughts on it. So hopefully I've been fair to John Vervaeke in the characterization of his ideas, but I've been listening a lot to what he's been saying. I've been listening a lot to Jonathan Pageau too, and to Jordan Peterson, and to different people kind of circumambulate or gravitate around a central idea. And I've played a lot of chess, and it kind of, I just had this really strong association between the domains. Like, I thought that chess could be a really interesting way of like making this idea more clear. Yeah, so summary of the argument, summary of the position would be that consciousness, I think that's the best word I can use, consciousness or intelligence or mind encounters an infinite data potential or a combinatorially explosive amount of information or complexity. That complexity has to be framed. It has to be framed according to a certain structure. That structure focuses our perception to attend to something, and that focusing process is a process of ignorance, not knowing, to focus and know something in particular and definite. So that's the process of meaning making or relevance realization or valuing, we could say. And these values frame what's meaningful. And what I'm suggesting is that there's ways. Okay, what I'm suggesting is that that's our relevance realization, our meaning making. And then I drew in this orthodox idea of the Nous, okay, the heart, the capacity to know God, the capacity for spiritual intuition, okay. And what I mean by that is our ability to tune our relevance realization, or to reflect upon our values, or to remodel or to transform our values. Our relevance realization structure becoming tweaked so it more closely represents what's good, true, and beautiful. And that is the Nous in Orthodox theology. The eye of the heart, the eye of the mind, or something like that. And through that capacity, we are able to aim true at what's true, good, and beautiful. And that capacity, the Nous, the heart, can become diseased, corrupted, and thrown out into confusion and chaos. Yet it's still operating because we have to have a relevance realization of some sort, but it's operating in a fragmented and confused and chaotic way. And that would be sin, as I understand it. Sin meaning hamartia, meaning missing the mark, missing those transcendental marks, missing the mark of what's at the top of the hierarchy. And what's at the top of a hierarchy in the context of chess is like perfect play, something like that. And that our actions in particular, novel, new, never been seen before positions and situations are to be attuned to that perfect play. And that is something like virtue. That is something like virtue. And that sin is forgetting or moving away from that ideal of perfect play into fragmentation, into chaos. So you've got these two movements of descent into chaos and fragmentation, and ascent into truth or source, or the source of the perfect and the perfect order, or something like this. And this is such an abstract concept that it's almost like we can never know it fully, But actually, the interesting thing is that we actually know it in the particulars of the position. So I think this is what is meant in Christian theology by the incarnation, that the Logos became flesh. I don't know, but this is an intuition about it, is that because each new chess position is unique and new, that means that it's so particular and incarnate and embodied that it's never been seen before. The particular, the material manifestation on the board is so particular and unique and embodied, and yet it's actually in that specificity, in that position which has never been seen before, that the Logos is like like when I say Logos, I mean like the truth, like the perfect play, the potential for making the right move, the best possible move to be made. That potential is like imminent in the position, which is a strange thing because that position has never been seen before. It's never, in theory at least, that position has never been played before by any other chess player. So how can we be sure it's the right move? But yeah, I mean, I'm saying lots of different ideas here, but that's how I'm thinking about it. Because there is a best move to be made. If you reflect upon it, if grandmasters and people do analysis of it and look at the position, they can determine a best move. But it's not quite as simple as a best move, because there's actually, there's a uniqueness of the position, there's different ideas to explore, and so maybe you could make a few different moves that would be good or quality. So it's a complex idea, but it's kind of where the particular and the principle intersect. I think that's what's interesting about chess, is you've got a very definite particularity, but then you've got a principle, and both these things are talking to each other. And I think that's something like what's meant in the Christian idea of the incarnation. So you've got good play or virtue and bad play or sin. You could even bring in the Christian idea of repentance being becoming conscious of the bad moves, conscious of the hamartia, conscious of the ways in which our meaning making is erring and straying and going off, understanding why that is the wrong direction to go, understanding what the principle is, what the source is of that mistake, drawing back into that source, drawing back into the principle which you're violating or transgressing through that hamartia, that reflection upon it, and then the committed action to then make a different move next time. That's what the meaning of repentance is in Christianity, is becoming conscious examination of our sin, a conscious examination of the ways in which we err or fail to miss the mark, and then a firm, embodied, enacted commitment to do something different next time, which draws our play closer to the truth. So maybe I'll leave it there. I wanted to talk about meaning making. I wanted to talk about relevance realization. I want to talk about the idea of frame and meaning through a commentary on the work of Jonathan Vervaeke, John Vervaeke, Jonathan Pageau, and Jordan Peterson, who all kind of talk about this idea, and I feel like they're circumambulating, which, with their own languages, with their own unique perspectives, circumambulating a certain idea at the center, an idea which Carl Jung was circumambulating as well, I think. And then I wanted to offer commentary on that idea and how that meaning making becomes pathologized, becomes diseased, becomes corrupt, and what that means, and what the opposite of that means. And I think that's something like sin and virtue. And so I think that has been helpful for me in thinking about morality, thinking about how to live in the world, how my thoughts, words, and actions are constituted, how they lay themselves out in my life. And I think the analogy of a chess game is very instructive in thinking about such things. So I really hope you appreciated the video. I hope this was insightful. I'm just thinking about it, really. I put out a few videos recently about sin, about Hamartia, about Nous, about chess and meaning, etc. And so this is kind of drawing on those videos, and hopefully kind of getting closer to the core idea that I'm wanting to kind of express and unpack a bit in this video. And I want to I'm really trying to understand that idea. So hopefully this has been helpful. Thanks for watching.